Hello. You may remember that I started this whole concept of this YouTube series based on taking aviation lessons and applying them to leading teams and developing teams in a rapidly changing environment. What I'd like to do today is introduce the basic idea today by using an aviation analogy again to bring it out. And then I'll tell you what the basic idea is we want to kind of think about today. Really, it has to do with this aviation concept of the pilot. And let me just make a couple of quotes. There was an article that was actually published on LinkedIn, and it was entitled The Pilot. And it was written by a lady named Erica Armstrong, and she had some very good points that are very valid when you're talking about pilots. What I'd like to do as an introduction is just give you three quotes that came out of her article, and I will give her credit for it because they're very good, and they're also very good in tying together what we'll look at today. Let me just quote them exactly so I do her justice. First and foremost, I found it very interesting that she said, the conversation between aircraft and pilot is intimate. It is just between the two of them. This deep, complex relationship began the first day their wheels released the earth together. She also added this quote that said, what is there that should not be? What is missing? What is the machine telling the pilot? Both speak to each other. Both must listen. And she followed it up with this, that once inside the cockpit, the dance begins. The rest of the crew joins in. Laughter, conversation, a kinship based on trust, experience, and knowledge. And it's this aspect of dance that I had been writing an article on already. And so it ties into this very, very well, because in a lot of ways, leading a team in a rapidly changing environment does sort of act like a dance. So what I'd like to do is just introduce you to a basic idea of the leadership dance. And it's leading any team, whether it's a cockpit, whether it's a business team, or anything like that, the leadership dance. And here's the basic point that I want to get across to you. When you're leading teams in a rapidly changing environment, as the leader, you're responsible. But there's certain things that the leader does not have control of and probably never will, particularly when you're talking about a rapidly changing environment. Let me give you an idea of a dance analogy. It's interesting that one collaborative exercise that I had at one point in my life about a couple of decades ago, I was actually did some competition swing dancing with my girlfriend at the time, who was a very classy and a really neat lady. And it was interesting that there's some things when you talk about dancing on the floor, when you're performing something, there's some external factors that you, the dancer, have no control of. You have no control over the tempo of the music, the style of the music, the inherent feel of the music, in essence. And part of the thing that the dancer wants to do is to bring that out and create synergy between their performance and that music. It was sort of interesting that my girlfriend and I were going to compete in this one event one time, and I had this song that I really, really liked and thought was cool. And I shared it with another much more experienced dancer in the community. And this lady listened to it, and she looked at me and she said, you know what, it's a fantastic song, but I want to share something with you. And I said, what is that? And she said, I can only think of one lady in the entire dance community at that time that could carry that off well, because the song had so much in it that it would be very hard pressed for people to connect with that and represent it well. So we never used that song, even though it was a good song. But the bottom line is, when you're talking about leading teams in rapidly changing environments, there are certain aspects over which you and your team will not have control. You have no control over your prospects and what they're dealing with, what their experience is. You have no control over external things that perhaps people on your team are dealing with at home. If they're going through a very stressful time, they may not be at 100%. And just you dictating to them and putting your thumb on their throat doesn't fix that. So there's a number of aspects that are external. One of the things that the leader has to do when you're talking about this leadership dance is to tie the potential of your team into the environment that you're in and maximize results in that situation. What you do, the decisions you make, the performance has to be something that maximizes that aspect. Just like the dancer on the floor, their performance, their maneuvers, how they demonstrate, how they style it, has to be consistent with the music, the tempo, the style, and all of that. And it's an art form in a lot of respects. But when you're talking about changing, leading teams in a rapidly changing environment, this is something that can change that quick. And the leadership has to be aware of when that is happening and also be able to help motivate their people in such a way that that they can get it done, even if he's or she is not there to make the difference and make the choice. I found it interesting. I posted a quote from a team member from Walt Disney, and he basically quoted it about Walt Disney. He said, really, Walt Disney's inspiration and his leadership really made us overachievers on his team. He said it was almost like he wasn't just the boss, he was almost our dad, our father. We wanted, not because it was dictated, this team member said, we wanted to overachieve. We wanted to perform with quality and success for him. And in a rapidly changing environment, when you're talking about this leadership dance, the leader has to kind of be able to motivate their team, lead them, and develop them so that that can all be maximized, even when there's certain things externally that you can never control. So the bottom line is, it's something to think about. And I offer for you, just for this particular video, to take a look inside of your organization, in your environment. What things do you struggle with? In your industry, what is coming on the horizon for you? Are you ready? When that music changes, when the style changes, can you adjust so that you get maximum results? Are your teams ready to do that? Do your leaders have clarity on what needs to be done different in the next 15 years? So it's just some things to think about when you talk about this leadership dance. Tailoring what you're doing to be aligned with the environment so that you can maximize results. Now, mind you, if the environment goes to something that is illegal or unethical, the leadership and the organization is fully within their authority, and rightly so, to say we're not doing that. But within the context of this rapidly changing environment, the leadership dance is an art form, and leaders have to be aware of that and have to start gaining clarity on how do things have to shift. How do I maximize these results to become almost synergistic, if you will, with the music? So I leave that for you this week. Look in your organization and see what you see.